Moms, are you looking to prioritize your precious time? Are you needing to say no to more things to clear the way for God to do the things He wants you to do? If so, my guest Victoria Duerstock has some great suggestions to get your days back into the sweet spot of life. Stay tuned. Hello, moms. Welcome to the Front Parking Spot podcast. I am so glad you're here. I'm Jennifer Bosma, wife, mom, grandma, former teacher for 23 years, and now a Christian children's book author and your podcast host. Are you a faith-based mom trying to live out a Christian life for your family? Do you want to learn more ways that you can have power over your child's spiritual growth? Inside this podcast, you will find tried and true ideas to grow in your faith and be the best wife and mom you can be. So listen in as you're cleaning up, doing the drive, or matching that sock, and be encouraged to know that God has His front parking spot set aside for you. Hello, moms, and welcome to the Front Parking Spot podcast. Today, I have Victoria Duerstock, and she is an award-winning author, entrepreneur, and multi-passionate creator fueled by purpose and plenty of coffee. As the founder of Endgame Press, a traditional publishing house with multiple imprints, she brings impactful stories to both the trade and Christian book markets. She is the author of the best-selling Heart and Home series, The Story of Good, Extraordinary Hospitality for Ordinary Christians, and numerous other books. Through publishing and writing, Victoria pursues her mission to create beauty and cultivate community while leveraging resources to make a lasting impact for the kingdom and leave a meaningful legacy. Victoria has been happily married for nearly 29 years and is the proud mom of 3 grown and almost flown children. Welcome, Victoria, to the Front Parking Spot podcast.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Can't wait to be with you today.
I know. I love your message that you have for moms. We were talking earlier about how moms get so busy. And you, I know, my girl, you are very busy. You juggle, you wear a lot of hats, and you have a lot of things going on. What do you think what can you share with moms today about how to, just isolate and make themselves less busy and say, do the big things and not be buried by little things?
Well, if they have any tips for me, that would be amazing because as you said, I do kind of run in a multitude of directions. I've worn many hats through the years. And one thing that I try to remember is that I can do all the things, but not all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's really tough because people who love to accomplish and raise families and be part of their church ministries and volunteer and we tend to take on too much and inevitably leads to kind of chaos in our homes. And so one of the reasons I started writing Heart and Home in the first place was first, they had to be short devotionals because no one has the length of time to sit down and really kind of deep study on a daily basis. I wanted something that they could pick up easily and read quickly for a piece of encouragement, one verse, one salient point, one thing to kind of chew on and think about all day. And it revolved around our homes and our hearts in a way where I was seeing elements of design in our homes. So balance and symmetry and focal points. But I can also see all of those things in my relationship with the Lord. When things are out of balance, when He's not my focal point, when there's no symmetry involved in my relationships, then I can be kind of chaotic and not really fun to be around. Moms control the environment of our families many times. And when we are feeling that chaos, whether it's physical chaos because we have too much clutter, or it's mental chaos because we have too many thoughts that we continue to think, or it's timing and chaos because we need to get the kids to practice or to school or run the errands and get the groceries and take care of making all the meals. And the to-do list can create such chaos in our hearts that I think that we end up alienating the people that we love the most and drifting in our relationship with the Lord. And so I really, my heart is for women, young women especially, that are in the throes of raising their children, just like I was a few years ago.
Yeah.
To know that if they're not doing everything they want to do right now, if they have ambitions or goals or dreams, that doesn't mean they're putting those things off forever. It just means it's not the right season for now. And because God delights to do things decently and in order, having our homes follow that same format as best can be done when children are coming behind us and destroying it just as quickly as we fixed it up. It's really honoring to God and our families when we do say, I want to do things decently and in order, but I need time to do that. And that means most likely saying no. I don't know about you, Jennifer,
Mhm.
but I struggle with looking at my schedule on paper and thinking, oh, there's lots of empty space. I can take on this task, or I can take on that ministry, or I can say yes to this.
Mhm.
And then a month later go, why did I say yes to any of it?
Right.
Yeah.
Y
And
You know what,
I don't,
I love what you're saying too, because I remember when my girls were little and we were in a new church ministry, and because I'm a teacher, so that's where people like, "Oh, we need you in children's church."
yes.
So
Yeah.
I was in the nursery, and they're like, "Oh, well, we need a substitute teacher. We need this, that, and the other." So I was like, "Okay." And then I was about ready to say yes. And then the lady, she's older, she was like, like a mentoring for me, and she said, I said, "Well, I think," I hesitated, and I said, "Well, I think I could probably pull that off." And she stopped and she said, "Wait." She goes, "You know what? You are so busy. You are doing so many things. I know you want to do it, but this is not the season for you to say yes." And I'll never forget that. And it was really, really, and I'm like, "You're right." And it was so freeing. And I'm like, "No, it's not my season to say yes, because we have this long life and there's always going to be needs and people." What is the expression? If you want something done, ask a busy person.
Absolutely. Yes,
And that was very liberating for me.
for sure.
Yeah. Well, how would you suggest for moms, Victoria, to prioritize? Like, how would you suggest for them to pick and to prioritize, like, things that they should say yes to
Hmm.
when you have so many requests?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that when scripture tells us that God grants the desires of our hearts, it's usually when we are in tune with what his desires are and they are already in our hearts and we are following him closely. And so if we have a desire in our heart that we need to go and do this thing, go
Mhm.
start this ministry, start a business, do something, I believe that he steers us in our directions if we're walking very closely with him. So I would say the very first step is obviously make sure that the time spent talking with God, hearing from him from his word, and putting that into practice regularly is going to give us clear direction when we have opportunities that are before us. And sometimes the good things can be the enemies of the best. It's not always I have this choice between this really evil, awful thing to do and this really great thing. It's usually the good things that maybe need to be done, but maybe they don't need to be done by me. I remember when the children were little, we had a season where my husband was a youth pastor. He was the children's ministry pastor. He was on multiple committees that were related to finance, as well as he had his own job. So that these were volunteer positions in the church. I was the church pianist. I also worked in the music ministry to lead the teams and work on special music for Sundays. And and when I say we were stretched thin, I mean we were stretched thin. And our family was young and fortunately pretty flexible, but we could see that we couldn't do that for very long because eventually they were going to have their own activities and their own sports events and their own things that we would want to be present for because as you know, they grow up really fast and they leave and have lives of their own and you look back and you go, "Man, that was really quick. It didn't feel like it in the time, but
Right.
man, that time goes by really fast." So when I look back and I think about priorities, I think prioritize the time with your family now because the other things can come later. I've always been really ambitious. I've always liked starting new things and being in charge and, running a business and doing all that. But I could not have done all of those things well when my family was younger because there wasn't enough time in a day that those things that I desired to do needed to wait until the children were a little more independent and they could do those things. And I think this is a message that's not real popular right now in circles, and I get it, but I'm also saying moms don't have to do all the things right now. There's lots of time, and when God opens doors and he leads you into the next season and the next thing to do, it'll be really apparent, especially if you are laying your will down and you're following him closely.
I love that. And I love it what you really said about praying first, because, when you really seek God's will, and I think my brother used to tell me, don't always say yes right away. If someone asks
Mm,
you something,
yeah.
just say, "Hey, I really appreciate you asking me. Let me just think on it. Let me just check with my husband."
Yes.
It's always good to I have to just check my calendar or something. And then that gives you some time to, just let it simmer and see if you really can do it and really
Absolutely.
pray about it and see. Because sometimes if we're so quick to say yes at the spot because you don't want to be awkward, say, "Well, I don't know, but it's okay."
It's hard to feel like we're going to disappoint people, right?
Right.
Because, they've obviously asked us for a reason. And so they feel, and sometimes, again, that can be a really good thing. They may need us to lead something because we've already done something else really well, but it may not be right because we may look down the road a month or two or a year later and think, I don't have any time to do the things I need to do. And I don't know why I said yes, and you regret it.
Mhm. Right, because, that's so true, because we don't wanna get off the path God has for us, and I love that because when God gives you a path, and I remember, with all the books I've written and stuff, and for all those who don't know, Victoria is she is my publisher for God is 3 in 1, so that is how we connected. But I remember with my book, whenever I've written a book, it doesn't leave you. You pray about it, and a lot of people are like, "Well, I wanna write a book," and I'm like, "That's great, sit down and write it." But when you have anything, when God gives you that in your heart, it doesn't leave. It just keeps coming up, and that's the thing that you need to pray about, because he will confirm your path, because
Mm.
there's so many different options that we can go in, so many roads in your life and so many highways. We wanna be on the highway he has for us and not get distracted with the other little things that will pop up.
And
So
the distractions are many, and I feel like they're increasing, in number. You know, the proliferation of the internet happened during the season of raising my children. And I remember, we homeschooled for many years as well. And I remember the oldest would text Cha-Cha for answers. That's super
cha-cha.
old
What
school, right? That's like talking to Grok now or Chat
right.
GPT, but this was a text number that you could ask questions. And I said, you need to go to the library and go find that. Like I
Mhm.
had to do it the hard way. And so the advancements that have happened in technology and the access that we all have to all the information all the time in every corner of the world that we didn't used to have to deal with on a daily basis, I think creates more clutter,
Mhm.
especially mentally, as we try to process all of this information that maybe we just don't need regularly. I don't advocate sticking your head in the sand and not knowing what's going on, but I think that there's this opposite effect happening, and it really does distract us from fulfilling our purpose and our mission and what God has us here to do. And
Mm.
and when the kids are little, they just need us more. And being available, I don't regret the years of choice that I made
Right.
to stay home with my children. I remember when it was time to pursue my graduate degree, it was, I wanted to accompany orchestras. I wanted to travel. I wanted to play, but I also wanted a family and I wanted to be married. And I knew that those two things would be very opposite paths, right? And it was going to be, if I looked down the road far enough and I considered the cost, which is, the Bible teaches us to do that, count the cost of what that's going to be, they would have gone in different directions. And while I could have made them work, I think the stress would have been far greater. And so I chose teaching, which was not my first love. I didn't really want to go down that path, but as my dad advised at the time, you can be home, you can do those things, you can be with your family, which you won't regret. And I don't look back with regret at all for that choice that I made to be home with them while they were young so that I can so that I can still enjoy them now when they're older. And now I can do the things that I'm passionate about. And accompanying an orchestra is not one of them today.
Mhm.
It's a whole lot of more work than I am ready to pursue at this moment. But I'm able to pursue passions and dreams and desires that I couldn't when I made that choice to be with them.
Two things I thought of when you were talking about that, Victoria. It's okay to change your passion. So many moms think like, and that was me with teaching, I am a teacher and that was my identity. And I remember when I got out of teaching and did, pursued the children's books and now with the podcasting and the ministry for moms, it took me some time when I use the plane example. When you're on a plane and you're chit-chatting with your neighbor and they're like, "So what do you do?"
Yeah.
And I would always say, "Well, I'm a teacher." But then I was struggling with, "Well, what do I do now?" Well, I'm a children's author and I have a women's ministry and a podcast and but it took it I remember having a moment when I don't need to say I was a teacher. I don't need to go back into my past. And I think moms, it's okay because I know, Victoria, you had the passion with music. And like you said, you're not doing it a lot now because you're so busy with with the Endgame Press and all the things you're doing entrepreneurial in writing. It's okay to pivot.
Yes.
Okay to have a change in passion. And you're not a label. You're not that identity. It's not like you're just not a teacher. It's okay to.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. We do tend to put our identity in the thing that we do, and yet we're taught that we shouldn't, right? Just a really great message that we had at our church just a few weeks ago, and I typed it out on my phone really fast because it was a statement about not placing our identity in something that can be taken away from us, whether that's a job or a career or something out. Like, don't put your identity in something that can be taken away from you. Our identity is who we are in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
We look to fulfill, his purpose. And I think it's so freeing to sit and say, whatever it is that God has for me to do, that's what I want to do. And I don't really want to do anything else because that sounds like a lot more work than really what I want to do.
Right.
And I want to just stay here where it is that he has me. And I will say that's not always the easiest. It sounds great. It sounds easy, but there have been times when I have questioned, why, God, did I go and get my master's degree just to be home homeschooling these young kids? And it wasn't, it was more like I didn't understand. I felt like maybe I wasn't using my giftings
Mm-hmm.
in a way to honor all of the work that had gone on before. But what I didn't understand at the time was there's not a time limit on being able to use that work and all of that training and even the discipline that was utilized in getting those things to get me to that next step. It's just a season. And I've looked back through the years and thought there have been many seasons as a mom, especially, that things looked very different in each season. We raised sheep for 4-H for several years. And when we moved from Florida here to Mississippi, my friends from Florida were like, "Are you okay? Like, do we need to send help? You're wearing cowboy boots and walking
I
lambs."
love it.
Like, they were so confused. And yet I look back with such fondness of those
Right.
years with the children because it was so beneficial for them to learn how to raise the sheep, to be part of that. And it was a whole new world, but it was such a good thing for them. And it was hard work and they learned
Mm-hmm.
to care, for the sheep. But it's just funny. It was a strange season, but it was a season nonetheless. And we don't do that anymore, but it's a fond memory now.
I love that. That is so liberating because we as moms, I mean, there's freedom, like just because
Yes.
you're doing it now. So
Yeah.
moms, if you're doing something right now that you're kind of feeling like you're getting out of the groove for and you're not feeling called to anymore, that's okay. It's
Yep.
okay because God is pulling you in a different direction. And like Victoria and I are both saying, we've had career changes and doing some things that we did in the younger that we don't do now. And it's funny you say that because we're getting ready to move and when my kids were little, we did Civil War reenacting. We live in Georgia, and my husband did the 125th Ohio, which was a Union group. And as we're moving, we have all this stuff. We have the Civil War musket. It just shoots gunpowder. It's not even a real. And we have the bayonet. And so we were like, what do we do? Because when we retire, when we go move in Florida, we're not going to be doing Civil War reenacting. And we haven't done it in like 20 years. And it's the same thing. And it was something he wanted to do at the time. We had great family memories. We would go and we'd pack and we would go dancing with the kids, like in the, they learned how to do the broom dance and all these old fashioned dances. And they remember that. And that's treasure. But but just because we have all the stuff, it's okay to donate it and declutter,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Declutter from the Civil War reenacting things and give it away so other people can do it. So I
Yes.
think that's so good. So it's so much of a freedom. Like you said, it's freeing.
Yes.
Wow. Well, do you have any other, I just love, I know you do a lot with hospitality and stuff, and some of your books with Heart and Home are on hospitality. I have one quick question before before our podcast is done. But what should a mindset be? Because this is saying yes again. What should a mom's mindset be about hospitality and not getting too burdened by it?
Well, I think it's really, really important. And now, even more so than probably when I started writing that book and published in 2020, I think society and culture, and even our church culture as well, confuses entertainment with hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
And the burdens we put on ourselves and what we think the expectations of others will be because of Pinterest and Instagram and all of the wonderful things that give us beautiful ideas.
Right.
But there are expectations that we think that must happen. We must, here in our area, it's pottery. It's a particular kind of pottery, and you always have it, and it's a thing. And I still can't get into it, but it is a very real thing. And I think it's lovely if you can afford it. But if you can't and you want to practice hospitality and you want to be the kind of person that's willing to open your door and allow people to come in and visit and talk about the Lord and talk about the things that are going on in your lives together, I think paper plates and pizza can be part of hospitality. And that's what I think I want people to take away from the message of saying yes to hospitality, is that, yes, I'm encouraging people, declutter, because if you declutter in advance and you have friends pop over, you're going to be really relieved they have a place to sit down and you don't have to stress. So you can do things in advance to prepare, and it's mostly a heart preparation in many cases, but it can also be practical. Like sometimes people just don't know how. And so the hospitality book was really my goal was to say, Jesus calls us to do this. Jesus calls us to be hospitable and have people over, but he doesn't call us to entertain. He doesn't say we have to have the finest china, and we don't have to have, all the things. We don't have to break our budgets and have to hide things from our husbands because, we're embarrassed that we've spent money. It needs to be the posture of our heart in saying, I welcome you into my space, and I want us to be transparent and honest. I share in my book, one of my core memories was the children were young, and I had a friend from down the street come over and knock on my door, and I kind of hid. And the reason for that was I had laundry. It was all clean, but I had laundry strewn all over the living room.
Right.
And I was embarrassed. I didn't want to let her come in. And so I kind of hid, and she kept knocking. And we have glass panels on either side. And so there wasn't really a good way for me to hide and pretend, for very long. I had hoped. But I opened the door and I let her in, and I apologized profusely for the condition of the house. And in that moment, she sat down and she just started folding clothes with me. And it was such a blessing because no longer did I feel embarrassed about the state of my home with young children, as we all can probably feel. But I also felt seen, and I felt heard, that I was kind of overwhelmed and didn't really know. I don't ask for help well. And she knew that. And she sat down, she started folding clothes with me, and then we talked and we had such a wonderful time. Such a core memory for me of how I should be willing to not only open my door for others, but also to do the same and see a need and help others in their moment too, because they may not ask for help either.
And God had a plan for that. And he knew that that was going to make a difference with you. And that is amazing because I think moms, it's so important to say yes to the important things like that. And I know my daughter's really good at that. She says yes and brings everyone over from church, and sometimes they have just potlucks
Yeah.
and everyone brings something, and
Yep.
everyone doesn't care if the house is messy. So, and I know when I get invited, I don't care what the house looks like. I'm just
Right.
so glad to go and have fellowship and just make new bonds. And so, when you're thinking of your yes and your no's, mom, be open to the yeses and, with the hospitality component to it, because I think we need to do more of that. And our kids need to see us doing that. 'Cause
Absolutely.
you're putting down your phone and you're just talking with people, and put that phone away. Don't have that phone in your hand, but wow. Well, Victoria, this has been amazing. How can they find you? How can people find your books? And I'll have everything in the show notes, but tell the listeners how to
Sure.
find you.
So I have a few different websites. I tend to be a collector, so maybe I am a hoarder at heart. I do like to collect those domain names, but I have my main site is victoriaduerstock.com. I do have heartandhomebooks.com, which is specifically related to my Heart and Home series. And then, of course, endgamepress.com is another place where, a lot of our books are located. Most of my books are on Amazon, so if it's an easy, search on Amazon, most of that stuff will pop up. And of course, wherever books are sold, many times you can find those things. It's been really neat to see kind of a resurgence in the hospitality book this year. Just had someone reach out the other day with a church group that was going to do it as a Bible study this year. And that's really encouraging to my heart because it really was my heart. I cried like majority of the time I wrote that one because it was all the things I felt like I still had to learn. When I write, I don't necessarily write as I'm this authority.
Mhm.
I haven't got it all figured out. But
Right.
what God's taught me, I want to share with other people and what I'm working on. And because I do think that it can be encouragement to someone else who might be experiencing the same thing.
And I think hospitality is so lost right now. And I'm no wonder why there's a resurgence in the book. That's amazing.
Well, it
Oh,
released right after the COVID shutdowns. And so I thought, God, I don't know what you're doing. I'm encouraging people to open their doors and
right.
welcome people in, and now they can't. So I thought, well, this is just gonna bomb, unfortunately. And God had plans. So I should have known better, but I assumed. And it's just a blessing to know that it can still be helpful to other people.
Absolutely. And God's timing is perfect every time.
Always,
Well,
always.
thank you, Victoria. I think we hit a lot of had some great nuggets here today for moms because they are so busy. And this was a great conversation we've had. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless.
Well, mamas, thank you so much for joining in. I know you are super busy doing all the things that can consume your day, but you took a couple of minutes to learn how God wants to build you up in your faith, family, and life. And He wants to applaud you for this. Please subscribe and review my show. This helps other moms tune in as well. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram at Front Parking Spot, on Facebook at Front Parking Spot Mom Community, or my website at jenniferbosma.com. Have an Ephesians 3:20 type of day, mamas, and be encouraged as you go for the front parking spot in your life today. God bless.